democratic government for the people of Israel and Palestine to make peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, between Palestinians themselves and between Israelis themselves. A common government that would be the only really legitimate government in Israel, Palestine, because the existing Israeli and Palestinian governments are not legitimate governments for the whole area because they are not elected by the whole area. We are proposing the creation of a democratic government for the entire people of Israel, West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. We have a constitution. It is available on our website at ipconfederation.org. The Constitution, if you go to the English portion or Arabic or Hebrew, you'll be able to read how the common government will be created, that it will be a government based on parliament, on the executive power, which is the president and vice president, and on a judicial branch, which are Palestinians and Israeli judges together. We are proposing a equal government for the people of Israel and Palestine based on democratic principles. And you can read the Constitution the full Constitution on our website, ipconfederation.org. My name is Joseph Avishai. You can send me emails to josephavishai@gmail.com. You can also read all the previous recordings of previous simulations, and many of the issues that are going to be raised right now many of them have been discussed in our previous simulations, and they're all on our website. Today we have two guests, Sam Bahour. Sam Bahour resides in Palestine and was born in Ohio to a Palestinian father and a Lebanese American mother. In 1994, following the signing of the Oslo Accord, he moved with his family to the West Bank to become involved in developing the future Palestinian state. He is managing partner at Applied Information Management and was instrumental in the establishment of the Palestinian Telecommunications Company, PLC, in the Arab Palestinian Shopping Centers, PLC. He is a co-founder and emeritus member of Americans for Vibrant Palestinian Economy, an independent director at the Arab Islamic Bank, PLC, and a board member at Just Vision. Additionally, Sam is a co-editor of Homeland, Oral History of Palestine and Palestinians. Our second guest is Bernard Avishai. Bernard Avishai is a professor of government and business. He teaches at Dartmouth College and formerly the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, splitting his time between Jerusalem and New Hampshire. He formerly taught at MIT and Duke. He's the author of The Tragedy of Zionism and New Israel, The Hebrew Republic, and Promiscuous Portnoy's Complaint, and Our Doomed Pursuit of Happiness. He contributes regularly on political economy and Israeli affairs to The New Yorker and has written dozens of articles for Harper's, The New York Review, The Nation, and New York Times Magazine. He's formerly editor at Harvard Business Review and international director of International Director of Intellectual Capital at KPMG. I should note that I interviewed both of them for the documentary Surviving Peace, which you can watch on YouTube. On May 14, we're going to have Bennett Romberg. He is in international relations at Johns Hopkins. He studied law at UCLA, and he's a nationally recognized nuclear weapon, proliferation, terrorism, and international politics. On May 28th, we will have Professor Shlomo Zand, and he's a professor of history at Tel Aviv University. On June 11th, I will be on vacation, so we will have no simulation. And on June 25th, we will have Yoram Parry, who is a former political advisor to the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and former editor-in-chief of the Israeli daily Davar. Davar was popular as Haaretz and had similar political thinking as Haaretz. We had many previous participants in many simulations. This is a list of the participants who appeared. I should note that Noam Chomsky appeared twice at our simulation, and he also reported a video in support of our formula for peace. There are people who were invited. Many people have been invited. Some have declined, but I would say most of the people on this list did not respond. And my point is, if they are really interested in peace, then all avenues should be explored, not just criticizing the Israelis or the Palestinians. We should have a true discussion about avenues for peace. And so I'm hoping that these people on the list will be coming to future simulations. The simulation will take approximately 120 minutes. We have several segments, and then we will end in the simulation, and then we will have a question and answers with our speakers. They have their own idea of a confederation. They published an op-ed in the New York Times, and I met with them earlier, and I know they're anxious to talk about their formula for peace. I told them that they will have time to do so during the question and answer, but they agreed to actually participate in the simulation, and then we'll have closing remarks. So that it's clear, Sam and Bernard are not speakers for the IPC. They were invited to stress test the IPC, to tell us what they think is right and what they think is wrong with our formula for peace. We have a video that explains our vision, the 2-minute video. I'd like to play it.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations, and instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government, At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So we are not calling for the dismantling of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We are calling for the creation of a new independent government for the people of Israel and Palestine. So at this time, we would like to do a pre-simulation survey. Do you support a common government? And we will conduct the same survey at the end of the simulation to see if there are any changes. So could you please vote at this time? Do you support a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine? I'll give you 2 more seconds. Can you publish the vote? 20 out of 25 said yes, 80%. And 5 out of 25 said no, and that's 20%. Perfect. Okay, stop sharing, and we will conduct the same survey at the end of the simulation today. I should note that a lot of the people that are in today's simulation have appeared before. So this is why they are familiar with what we are discussing. And this is why we have such a high level of yes on the common government. I do not anticipate that if we actually have a survey within Israel, Palestine, at this time, we will get the same results. Our purpose is to demonstrate how a common government could make peace, not only between Israelis and Palestinians, but also between Israel and the whole neighborhood. We are not anti-Israel or anti-Palestinians. We are pro-peace. We have our own ideas for peace. We follow our own narrative. We do not follow the Israeli narrative or the Palestinian narrative, and we do not anticipate that a common government will do so. We believe that a common government, once it is created, it will follow its own narrative. What's good for the people of the whole area, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. We expect to have a rigorous discussion, but always a respectable discussion. And like I said, we do not preclude other formulas for peace, and we think that a common government could adopt other formula for peace. And we are not claiming exclusivity. We are going to ask Sam and Bernard to judge our based on these criteria. Could the IPC formula attain peace? Is the plan implementable? Is there a downside for either the Israeli or the Palestinians? But we ask you to be fair. We ask you not to judge us based on perfection. We outright say right now, this is not a perfect plan, but we ask you to judge it based on what's the alternative, not what's perfect. Perfection is the enemy of good. We will be proposing legislation to demonstrate how a common government could make peace and could create a situation where neither the Israeli nor the Palestinian government could object to our legislation. What we are showing is the tip of the iceberg. We're just demonstrating how it could be done. We're not saying that the common government will actually do that. We're just demonstrating how it could be done. We're asking you, the audience, and Sam and Bernard, to look at the big picture, avoid technical arguments. We are limited by time. Technical arguments are could be resolved, but when we have an hour and a half to deal with these issues, we're asking you not to get into technicalities. Refrain from comments. Questions are encouraged. This is a lecture. I'm sorry, this is a simulation, not a lecture. A simulation is a model that mimics the operation of an existing or proposed system. So keep in mind, this is a simulation. It's not a lecture. And that's why we're asking you to ask questions, but refrain from comments. If I show you an airplane and you say, Joseph, how does this plane fly? That's a question. That's legitimate. But if you say, Joseph, airplanes cause pollution, that's a comment. Please put your comment in the chat or wait until the end, but refrain from comments because this is a simulation. We are demonstrating how a common government could work. And we're asking you to stick to the program rather than change the program into a discussion about something else. In the simulations, we are asking you to make some assumptions. The assumptions are, and that's very, very important. And by the way, I met with Sam and Bernard. They are aware of these assumptions and they are prepared, and they received the entire PowerPoint presentation. These are the assumptions that we want you to make for the purpose of the simulation. The simulation is dependent on these assumptions. That we held an online election that lasted 3 months. That today, April 30th, the election ended. So we need to pretend that the election ended today and lasted 3 months. We need to assume that 14 million people were allowed to vote. That's people in Gaza, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Israel. 14 million people were allowed to vote. That 5 million people actually voted. That 3 million Palestinian voted and 2 million Israeli voted. That the president received 1.5 million votes. That I, Joseph, I was elected as president. Now, so that you are aware, I am never, ever going to, I don't plan to ever run for president, but it makes it easier for me to act in this simulation as the president because it's easier to facilitate the simulation when I am the president. I want you to assume that a vice president and a Palestinian lady has received 1.3 million votes, and she and I will rotate in 2 years. I also want you to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in the whole area of Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, and Jerusalem. 300 parliament members. And each parliament member represents a district of 47,000 people. These are the assumptions that I want you to make in this simulation. So we're going to be asking Sam and Bernard. Let's start with Sam. Sam, do you have any difficulties or problems accepting those assumptions?
Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you all. Yes, I do. Let me start just briefly by commenting on some of your introductory remarks that I think need addressed. You mentioned that IPC is about people, not land. There's a flaw in that thinking, given the core of this conflict is land.
Sam, could you restrict your question to the assumptions now?
Sure. You said facts and assumptions on the same page, so I put notes on both. Should I address both?
Yeah, the assumptions.
Well, the assumptions are based on some facts that I don't think are facts. So let me just make a comment there. You said the Israeli prime minister represents Israelis only. You currently have an Israeli government, successive governments that say they represent all Jews around the world, even if only Israelis get to vote. That needs to be taken into consideration. Your second fact is the Palestinian leaders represent Palestinians only. Palestinian leaders is a very broad topic. I'm a leader in the business community. I don't represent anybody in the political world. So I think we need to have the language to be equal in terms of agency. In terms of your assumptions, the biggest assumption I would have an issue with is, again, back to the original comment that I made, 14 million people are allowed to vote. We are 14 million people ourselves as Palestinians, and we happen to be scattered around the world because of the conflict. We believe all Palestinians should have a role in voting. So I would see that you're omitting Palestinian refugees, Palestinian diaspora, etc. That would be my comment.
Okay. So just to respond, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas had an election. They did not permit Palestinians outside the area to vote.
But are we talking about the past elections or the stimulation of a IPC?
We are speaking about the simulation.
Yeah, the simulation is going forward. I'm not talking about history. We can talk about history if you want.
Okay. All right. But are you saying that it is unrealistic to have to have 14 million people given the right to vote?
No, I'm saying that if you're creating a formula moving forward that resolves the conflict from a Palestinian perspective, all Palestinians, those in the occupied territory like myself, and those that have been expelled or are not here for any reason, also have a right to vote.
Okay, I understand. Now you are challenging the wisdom of whether to have a confederation, a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine only.
I didn't get there yet. We're talking about the pool of people who
but
have
I'm asking technically, is it possible to allow the 14 million people in Israel, Palestine to vote?
Yes, of course.
Okay, are you willing to accept the underlying assumption that 5 million people voted for this simulation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a model you created out of the blue, but it's not representing
Are you willing to play along that I was elected as the president?
Sure. I mean, I play Monopoly with my kids all the time, so I have no problem playing the game.
Okay. Are you willing to go along with the understanding that 300 parliament members?
Yeah, the rest, I can accept all the rest if it's a game that we're playing. Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's go to Bernard. Bernie, do you have any comments or are you unwilling to accept those assumptions? Is Bernie here?
Unmute, Bernard.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm not quite sure how to cut into this issue. Being from Montreal, I'd be the last person on earth to question the value of confederal systems. Sam and I certainly have agree in principle.
Bernie, can you speak about the assumptions, because we need to move forward.
Well, I'm trying to speak about the assumption, but you're presuming a structure where you're asking me to relate to the various details of the structure, where I feel like I have problems with the way in which the structure has been presented in the first place. So, I can continue to go along with this fiction, and we can talk about that. I don't think that's going to be very productive or terribly interesting. I do think that we should be talking about the scope of confederation. I don't think talking about the scope of confederation is valuable at the level of thinking about how many people may have voted in a hypothetical election or whether there's a prime minister of this or that. I feel like
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Joseph, I'm your guest. Joseph, I'm your guest, but you're going to have to let me finish my sentence. I think it's much more interesting to talk about the scope.
Yeah, but we have a discussion about this simulation. It's really not respectable to say, I want to talk about something else. We have
I'm-
a question
I'm-
here. We are making a presentation. Do you have any issues with the assumptions? That's all I'm asking. It's not fair to say, let's talk about something else. This is what.
You're asking me to, do I believe the Israeli prime minister represents Israelis only? Is
No,
that what you're
asking
you
you about the assumptions. Read the assumptions. Online election voting took place online and lasted and ended today. Do you have any difficulty accepting that assumption?
I'm not, I have no, do I have difficulty accepting a particular hypothetical that is posed? If you say so.
Correct.
Do I think that an Israeli prime minister represents Israelis only? Here I'll disagree with Sam. Israeli
Okay,
prime
look,
minister.
it's very clear. It says here in the assumptions, online election platform was placed and voting period lasted 3 months. Okay, do you?
No. I'm going back. I'm going back to the facts. Israeli prime minister represents Israelis only.
I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you about the assumptions.
But Sam said a moment ago that Israeli prime ministers purport to represent all Jews. That's not the case. Some Israeli prime ministers.
You were not invited here to argue with Sam about whether the prime. You were invited to deal with a simulation, and in the simulation, we are making assumptions. And I'm giving you an opportunity to respond to those assumptions, not to respond to Sam. Okay.
Let's see how this plays. Why don't we say that I see these assumptions and I want to see the use you'll make of them in creating some kind of simulation that will generate some kind of intelligent discussion.
All right.
Okay.
The whole simulation is based on these assumptions. And I believe these assumptions are realistic. They could become a reality. I want to remind everyone that 1 day of full-fledged war between Gaza and Israel cost over $100 million. And with $100 million, these assumptions could become a reality. So now I'm going to be asking people in the audience to volunteer. I need a person to volunteer to be Israeli prime minister. And
I'm always happy to do that.
okay, before I give you that role, because you've done it, are there any other people who are willing to be Israeli prime minister in this simulation? Okay, Len.
Shlomo Orr is raising his hand.
Shlomo Orr. Okay, so he'll be the president. Yeah. Len, you've done it many times. Shlomo is the prime minister. Do we have a Hamas leader? Person willing?
I'll volunteer.
Sean, okay.
Yeah.
And do we have a PA leader?
I can do that, Joseph.
Nasir.
Yes.
Terrific. The rest of you, we will ask you to be either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members. Remember, your district could be either Israeli or Palestinian. You could be representing a district that is exclusively Israeli or exclusively Palestinian, or a mixed district. Many of the districts will be mixed districts. So I'm asking you to be intellectually honest and to remain as what you chose to be, either Israeli or Palestinian parliament member. And throughout the simulation, and I may ask you, what city do you represent? And by the way, Sam and Bernie, you could also act as Palestinian or Israeli parliament member in this simulation. So let's have, first we're going to have to see how many Palestinian parliament members we have. Could you please put the voting for Palestinian? Please vote yes, so we see how many Palestinian parliament members we have in this simulation. Palestinian only. Okay. Okay, more voting, I see. Okay, publish the vote. We have 12 Palestinian parliament members. And let's have the Israelis vote. How many Israelis we have? Okay. Publish the vote. We have 10 Israelis. Okay, thank you. Keep in mind the map and what area do you represent, because I may be asked you during the simulation, if the issue comes up, what is the area you represent? The first issue we have to, now we accepted we accepted the assumptions in the simulation. I am the president. We have a parliament. The first issue we have to pass is a constitution. Libby is not here today, so I'll. Is there anyone who wants to read out the constitution aloud?
I'll read it if you want, Joseph.
Oh yeah, Charles, great. Go ahead.
We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislatures and governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
All right, so two things to keep in mind from this constitution is that we are a separate government. We do not intend to undermine or supersede or supplant the Israeli or Palestinian government. They can agree to anything between them. We cannot undermine any agreements between them. They can agree to one state, two state, whatever they wish. We constitutionally are prohibited from undermining their agreements. We, as a common government, if will pass legislation, if the legislation interferes or violates their sovereignty, then we will give them a veto power regarding that legislation. Does anyone have any, Sam and Bernard particularly, do you have any questions or comments regarding this constitution? Let's start with Sam.
Well, I'd only say again that what would be interesting regarding any constitution is how you look at the various jurisdictions that the states exercise. And I mean, in principle, most of these bullet points are commitments, which I think Sam and I both adhere to very strongly, commitments to liberal norms, freedom of conscience, secular ideas about how states derive their legitimacy and so on. And I find none of them objectionable. But it seems to me that if one is going to build a constitution, the most important question is what jurisdictions will be exercised by this common entity, and what jurisdictions will be exercised by the states themselves. None of that appears here. And I would love to, as I said before, steer the conversation towards that kind of question.
Well, the issues that we are can deal with are all the issues, every issue. We choose the issues. We are the common government. We choose all the issues. If they violate the sovereignty of the Israeli or the Palestinian government, we give the Israeli and the Palestinian government the veto power over. Let's go to Sam. Sam, can you have comments?
No, I agree with Bernie. I mean, these are general principles that I agree with in this hypothetical situation.
Okay. Does it? I saw people raise their hands. Could you please speak out, because it's hard for me to see people. I see the PowerPoint because. Can you speak out if you have a question?
Hello, Joseph and everyone in attendance and our guests. My question is Don Raphael speaking from San Francisco, California. My question is, how can the IPC be legitimate if it is recognizing the power of the existing governments? And I would imagine really for a long period, but particularly today, and particularly Israeli government, that much of the legislation would be routinely vetoed. And right off the bat, how would an infrastructure for such IPC elections take place? How would the Israeli or Palestinian existing governments allow that? And what would be the mechanism to vote if that ever took place, which would be a far leap?
Well, the legitimacy comes from election. The election will be conducted online. We will, the Palestinians and Israelis, 14 million people in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem and Israel will be allowed to vote. And it will be the only legitimate government, because the Israeli government and the Palestinian existing governments do not have not allowed the entire area the right to vote. And we are the only.
So Joseph, just right off the bat on the question of the veto, I mean, what would be the infrastructure to have such an election? Because I couldn't imagine the Israeli government in particular, and perhaps all three entities, not vetoing this election, such an election.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you see, we have to deal with your imagination, and that's we have to deal with reality, not imagination. The Israeli government has never opposed this. We did have an election before, they never opposed us. So once we do the platform online and the Israeli government opposes it, then we have to deal with reality at that time. The reality may be exposing them and showing that they have not been able to make peace, but how would they even have the legality? What is their legal right to oppose this election? They may not like it, but they don't have the legal right to do so. They don't have and they wouldn't have the system, the technology to oppose this. But so again, we're not really dealing with your imagination. We have to deal with reality.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, hearing no questions, let's take a vote ratifying the Constitution. Palestinian parliament members, please vote first to ratify the Constitution. Palestinian only. Do you support the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation Constitution? Palestinians only, vote.
Maybe something should be said about the consequences.
Well, if you do not ratify the Constitution, then you're expelled from the parliament, because just like in any other parliament, you have to accept the Constitution. Okay, so did the person understand the consequences, voted no? So the person who voted no is expelled from the Constitution, from the parliament, I'm sorry. You're still a citizen of Israel or Palestine, but you're expelled from the parliament. You're not allowed to vote. Okay, so 92% voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Again, if you vote no, you are expelled from the parliament. And whoever got the second number of votes from your district will become a parliament member. Okay, share the result. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of the Constitution. Thank you. So this is a momentous occasion in the history of humanity. This is the first time the area of Israel-Palestine created a democratic constitution. It's an event that we should congratulate ourselves for, and it's a really huge step for peace. Let's go to our first legislative issue. Okay, so to answer the questions that came up, the Israeli government and the Palestinian governments do not really have a reason to object. And if you say that Israelis or Palestinians will not vote, they are not a monolithic society. Some Israelis will vote, some Palestinians will vote. Like I told Dawn, they do not have the legal authority to object, the Israeli or the Palestinian government, or the moral authority. They failed to give us peace for 75 years. And if they try to oppose this, then they may lose legitimacy. And they never attempted to stop the election. We did have a full-page ad in the New York Times for the elections on December 12, 2012. They never opposed it. They never tried to do anything to prevent the election. And they didn't know what was the how many people will vote. It turned out that not too many people voted, but the Israeli and the Palestinian governments were aware of this election and did not try to stop it. Okay, let's go to the next issue, and that is granting a veto power to the separate governments. Charles, could you please read the first legislation?
Granting a veto power to the separate governments. The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel and Palestine from the river to the sea. We recognize the Palestinian and Israeli governments and are seeking their cooperation to implement our vision for peace by giving them a veto. We will do our utmost to satisfy the essential needs of each government. We are pleading with the Palestinian and Israeli public to understand that while we would like to pass the best legislation possible to improve their lives, under these constraints, a perfect legislation is not possible. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting the sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas. In the event of changes in governments, this legislation may be amended or repealed.
All right, before we vote, Bernie or Sam, do you have any comments or questions regarding this legislation?
Yes, I do. This is extremely flawed because the Palestinian government is not the Palestinian Authority. It is the PLO, represented in the legislative body called the Palestinian National Congress. Also, Hamas is a party. If you're going to put Hamas, we need to also list all the other Palestinian parties and Likud and Labor and Jewish Power. So there's oranges and apples being discussed here. I think this is significantly flawed.
All right, to respond to your question, we are a separate government. And we give veto power to those entities that could prevent us from implementing our legislation. So we don't really care what they're called. We believe that it makes sense to give the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas a veto power because they can prevent us from implementing our legislation, and we need their cooperation, and we need we need to have good relations with them. Doesn't necessarily.
I would then, Joseph, I would add the United States of America there as well.
No, the United States of America cannot prevent us from implementing legislation in Israel and Palestine.
Really?
Yes. See,
They prevent us from having elections here today.
look, Sam, I am the president.
If you want to deal with
of this-
reality, they prevent us from having elections today in Palestine. But I mean, if you want to, I mean, you're creating your own hallucination, you can do that. If you want to deal like you answered the person before, in reality, the United States can call the shots here. They fund here.
I believe, I am the president, okay? I believe that in order for us to build a joint economic zone or to have a joint in Gaza and in Calkilia, and to have other legislation implemented, I would not be able to do it without the cooperation of the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas. I will be.
You asked my input.
I will be able to do it, even if the United States of America or Russia or France object.
I
That's
disagree, but that's fine.
my political analysis as the president.
Okay, I mean,
Joseph,
we can deal with, you know, feelings and analysis or facts. I mean, I'm not sure what the game is that we're playing
Well,
here.
we
but
don't
disagree,
know
so
that
that's fine.
we don't know that it's a fact. We don't know.
Right. It's an analysis, and I have a different analysis. So that's a dilemma.
I know, but you're not the president. I am the president.
But the president doesn't define. The president suggests and has a venue to talk about it. Ultimately, there needs to be a vote.
Right, but are you acting as the advisor to the president?
No, I'm asking as someone, as a guest, commenting on the parliament's deliberations.
Okay, we are now in a simulation.
Yeah,
Are you acting as the advisor to the president?
no, I'm a guest to the parliament.
You are what?
I assume I'm a guest to the parliament.
No, you're not a guest to the parliament.
What am I?
You are a commentator to this simulation, that's all. But have you chosen
word
to be a
same.
parliament member?
So I'm
Have you
acting
cho-
in a commentator status.
Right. Have you chosen to be a parliament member?
No,
Okay. Why not?
I'd rather observe.
Okay, so you're an observer.
That's what I said.
Okay. Any other comments?
you know, Sam, I'm sorry, Joseph. Sam is our guest commentator here, but the thing I noticed is that this issue that he just addressed is always brought up by every single Palestinian who comes as a guest or even like a visitor. And I think it's because, and even I have problem with that. Singling out Hamas and the PA as the representatives of the Palestinians is problematic.
But you're not responding to my concern.
But what I'm saying is if this comes up.
You're responding to look, this is not a Palestinian government.
Okay, but if this is something that comes up in the
This is
past
not a
every week,
Palestinian
every 2
government.
weeks,
This
why
is
don't we
a-
just
is-
say the governing authority of Palestine and that's it and solve this problem? Because this is always an obstacle.
Because we know specifically we have to deal with Hamas. I don't want to pretend, okay? I know
Okay,
that.
but Hamas can be voted out of power tomorrow, just like Likud can be
Yes,
voted out of
and
power
then it
tomorrow.
says
So
in
do we have
the
to make
event
a
of
constitutional
changes in
amendment every time the
governments-
new parties are in
Okay.
power? Just
Okay,
put
look,
the
you're
governing-
looking at it from a Palestinian point of view.
Well, I'm Palestinian. Of course, I'm going to look at it from a
Right,
Palestinian point
yeah,
of view. Which other point of view am I going to look at it?
But this is, but like I said, we are a common government We are not seeing it from the Palestinian or the Israeli point of view.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce legislation next time that we vote to change this. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
problem solved.
Yeah. Okay.
May
but
I make,
it
may I
says-
make a comment on this? I think what Sam's implying is that it's perfectly reasonable of you to say that Hamas right now should have some kind of recognition seat at the table. They basically rule in Gaza. And I think what you're implying by this is that there's a Hamas government in Gaza. There's another entity, the Palestinian Authority, where Fatah is leading, although it's a very tenuous hold. I think what Sam is saying are two things. First of all, the Palestinians are going to want to have some kind of common authority in the future, and to
Yeah, but the Palestinian concern is one-sided. This is a simulation. I am the president of the whole area. My concern is not the Palestinian concern or the Israeli concern. My concern is to implement legislation. Okay, let's go to a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote.
I have a comment.
Shlomo has
There's
a
a hand
hand.
up, Joseph.
Shlomo had a question.
You have questions or comments?
Just to explain something, because I think that United States. Just one comment: the United States is very important here. The influence is enormous, but they are outsiders after all. So what I think Joseph is trying to do is to say, okay, these are the forces now occupying. Let's deal with the forces that now control this area. And go from there. Of course, in the future could be many changes, but that's, I think, what he's trying to say.
All right, let's take a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Do you support this granting of veto power? Okay, publish the vote. 9 out of 10 voted yes. Let's go to remember, we need 55%, so we have 90% voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Okay, let's publish the vote. 88% voted in favor. So we agree to give all these three entities veto power. If you wish to introduce separate legislation on this, go ahead and send it to me and we'll introduce it next time. These are the legislations that we are speaking today that will have a veto power. Teaching tolerance and understanding, mutual police force, and converting Kalandia into a joint economic zone. Let's start with the first one. Charles, can you please read the first legislation?
Teaching tolerance and understanding. Both educational systems to teach tolerance in their public schools. Devote a certain number of hours for both sides to teach the history of Israelis and the Palestinians. Prioritizing teaching Arabic and Hebrew in public schools to achieve proficiency of both languages by Israeli and Palestinian students. Create a mutual task force to ensure the teaching of both languages. Educators to draft textbooks together and arrange for a regular exchange of teachers. Public media on both sides to provide fair and equal coverage daily for teaching tolerance. IPC as a facilitator to ensure that both sides are fairly represented. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation, including Sam and Bernie?
No comments here.
Bernie?
Well, the only thing I would say is that when you said before that the Confederation would deal with those things that are in common, and the two separate states should be still separate states.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said we will deal with every issue, and the Israeli government and the Palestinian governments, not states, governments, will remain. As far as we are concerned, they could remain. They can also dismantle themselves. But we are dealing with governments, not with states.
Okay, I understand. We're dealing with governments, not with states. Well, then what are the governments governing exactly?
We are the government of the whole area of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. And we recognize the power. We recognize the power of the Israeli and the Palestinian government.
Okay, let me put it another way. In the Canadian Confederation, the most important jurisdiction held by the provinces is education. Now, I certainly agree with the spirit of this, and we should want any joint institution to encourage both states to teach tolerance and to teach particularly the history of the other side as the other side might wish it taught. And that should be reciprocal. But I think that if the first task of a joint government, a confederal government, is education, it's actually appropriating to itself a jurisdiction which is the most sensitive and will probably excite the most resistance on the part of the two residual governments.
Okay, let's take a vote. Palestinian parliament members, could you please vote on this legislation?
Janine had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janine. Okay, just speak up because I don't see. Janine,
Yes, please. My question is regarding whether or not anybody has heard of a language that's called Esperanto, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
You have to ask questions regarding what's being presented to you.
Yeah, because what's being presented, let me explain why the question. Okay. The
because
question
Esperanto
pertains to language.
is not being discussed here.
It is.
Not
You're talking about teaching Hebrew and teaching Arabic.
Correct.
I am assuming that people who are Israeli already know Hebrew. People who speak Arabic as their native tongue already speak Arabic. Now,
Janine,
if you know anything about Esperanto,
this is a simulation. I said at the beginning, this is a simulation. We need to ask questions.
Okay. The question is, could tolerance and understanding also be more profitable for everybody if we had a neutral third language? A lot of people in the world learn English.
I don't know the answer. Let's take a vote.
When you spoke about veto, you spoke about France and Russia. You mentioned those countries.
No, I did not speak about. Look,
you mentioned them in response to somebody's comment.
You're kidnapping the simulation into another conversation.
Okay, it's in a different conversation. I will repeat what my question is because you don't understand my question. Nobody understands my question. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let's have a vote. Palestinian parliament members, do you support tolerance and understanding? Okay, publish the vote. 9 out of 9 voted yes. Stop Palestinian. Let's stop sharing. Let's go to the Palestinian Israeli parliament members. Please vote. We have more Israeli voters. I don't know why you're not voting. Maybe you left or.
Some of the Palestinians were put in prison, that's why.
No, come on, don't mock.
It happens, believe me.
All right, let's publish the vote. Also, 9 out of 9 Israeli voted. So we passed the legislation. Go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation? Hamas leader.
No, I'm not going to veto it.
Let's go to the PA. PA leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
I am not going to veto this legislation.
Thank you. Let's go to the Israeli Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I don't veto.
Okay, great. So we passed important legislation. Neither side vetoed it. And we're making another important step for peace. Common police force. Can you, Charles, can you please read the legislation?
Common police force. Equal number of Israeli and Palestinians at each level. Distinct uniforms for the common police force different from the Israeli or Palestinian police force, independent of the Israeli and Palestinian security forces, in cooperation with the separate Israeli and Palestinian authorities. Address sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirements. Facilitate the operation of the joint economic zones. Investigate corruption by administrators who refuse to teach tolerance. Investigate allegations of intolerance and racist hate crime against Israelis or Palestinians. Assist in managing checkpoints. Guard the parliament building and threats against members of the Confederation. Facilitate access to and safety of religious facilities. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Right. Does anyone have any questions regarding this proposed legislation? Sam or Bernie?
There's a word in there that troubles me. Checkpoints. That's not going to fly with the Palestinian side.
Okay.
I mean, unless you're talking about
I'm
checkpoints on
asking
the
for
green
questions,
line.
not comments.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that checkpoints, does that mean the existing checkpoints within the West Bank? Is that the checkpoints you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
Okay. Any questions by Sam or Bernie?
I have too many to list, to be honest with you. This is not the way legislation is done. Putting in somebody's face 10 points, agree or don't agree. I can't agree with anybody's 10 points, including my wife's, unless I have an opportunity to discuss the 10 points before they get on the paper.
Okay.
Is this a Capitol Police? Is it a border police? Is it an economic zone police?
It's a common police force.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, because in this description,
I'll tell you what it means. It means that equal number of Palestinians and Israelis will be on each level in the police force.
That I understood. That I understood.
They will have distinct uniform.
I read this. I read it. There's an
They will
economic
be
zone,
independent.
there's a
So
Capitol Police.
what points do you not understand of what's being presented? What
The jurisdiction of this police force, remember, we have history, Joseph. We're not coming from the moon.
I know,
We
I
had
know
a joint,
we have
we had a
history.
joint security thing here. We have an experience with this. So we're talking from knowledge, not
We do
from
not have an
hallucination.
experience. That's not true. We never.
That's why I said it's fine. I mean, you can create any 10 points you want. I agree with it because it's your opinion. But if you want to discuss your opinion, that's a different discussion you don't want to have. So I agree with whatever you put here because it's your opinion.
Okay, what specific objections or misunderstanding you have regarding the specific legislation that is being raised?
Facilitate access and safety to religious facilities. I have a church in Albire under Palestinian jurisdiction. I don't think this common force has anything to do with it.
Okay. It,
Example, that was an example.
it didn't say, it says it facilitates the operation of the joint, I'm sorry, where are you reading?
The last point, it says
The last
facilitate, and I said I don't think it has anything to do with it, including facilitation.
Facilitate access to the safety and religious facility, okay?
I don't know what safety facilities are, but religious facilities are under the jurisdiction of governments of states. So I don't know how you facilitate something. The other side says
we
nothing to do with it.
are saying that the common police force will facilitate access to the safety of religious facilities.
My opinion in
You don't
commenting is
understand
I don't
that?
think I don't think this force has a role in facilitation of sites that are under the jurisdiction of states.
Yeah, but we are giving the Israeli and the Palestinian government the power to veto this.
Exactly. So I agree with any 10 points you put on because it's your
Okay.
opinion.
No, this is legislation. It's not my opinion. It's a
If it's not your opinion, then let's discuss every point. If it's your opinion and we're just discussing voting yes or no on it, otherwise we need a couple of days to discuss each point here.
Okay. Bernie, do you have any
Well,
comments?
can I just use this as an occasion to make a point that Sam and I actually made in our article, whereas something like education feels to me rather difficult to be appropriated by a confederal entity of any kind.
But
Much
we
as
already
I
passed
agree,
it.
much
We
as
already
much as
passed
I
it. We
mu-
already
mu-
passed it. We already passed it. We agreed on it. Why?
I was
Debate.
about to use that just as a point of contrast. I think something like a common police force is actually, or at least joint patrols, or any institutions that will yield something like a common collective security environment is going to be very important. It's going to be important because peace is going to be challenged. There will always be residual groups on both sides that would prefer a fight to the finish rather than prefer some form of reconciliation. And we saw how those groups destroyed the Oslo peace process. I think it's very important to have some kind of joint commitment to collective security so that when there are atrocities coming from either side, they will be seen as an attack on the common future of both sides rather than as a kind of national fight, some kind of national statement that will lead to polarization. So I am in favor of the spirit of this, even if I find the points, as Sam does, less than convincing. I do think collective security is a very important part of any confederal system.
All right, great. All right, let's take a vote. Palestinian.
There's a comment by Shlomo, I believe. Or
Yeah.
question.
Right. So I am confused about a few things, about the fact that on one hand, this is fiction. On the other hand, this is reality. The reality, there are checkpoints. The fiction that we are playing now is there shouldn't be the checkpoint should not be even there. So which one is which? Are we in the reality?
We have different legislation to remove all the checkpoints. Okay, we have Nasir presented that legislation. We're not going to present it today. We did present it before, but right now we have existing checkpoints. Okay, that's reality. Let's take a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Do you support an Israeli-Palestinian Confederation police force? We need 55% of the Israelis For the Palestinian, I'm sorry, these are the Palestinian voted. And the polling. Share the results. 80% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. And let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Publish the vote. Share the results. 86% of the Israeli voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, no, I'm not.
Okay, let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No, no veto.
Okay, and the Palestinian Authority leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes, I'm going to veto it. And for the reasons is the checkpoints and what Sam said. Religious facilities, that means any mosque, any synagogue, that doesn't make sense. Maybe like holy places like Hebron, like where there's joint interest by both Jews and Muslims, maybe. But
it doesn't say that it requires each, this will work, you're going into the details.
well, of course, because, you know, I don't want Israeli.
It doesn't say that every
details. The devil is in the details, Joseph.
Site, no, there are many temples inside Israel. It doesn't mean that those temples will be under the jurisdiction of the common police.
Well, I mean, have you been to Hebron? Did you see what joint toleration did in Hebron? I mean, it's
Okay, but let me ask you this. If we remove the religious facilities.
I want to be able to drive from Jenin to Bethlehem without hitting the brakes.
Okay, are you aware that Al-Aqsa Mosque is the access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque? That's really what we are talking about.
Okay, then put Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Okay, so if we put Al-Aqsa Mosque, will you agree?
But the checkpoints, I can't agree to anything that has checkpoints within the West Bank. I can't. That's like suicide for me.
But so you will not agree that it will be done with that instead of removing Israeli forces, we will have common government. That you
Doesn't say that, Joseph. It doesn't say that.
you prefer the Palestinian people to go through the checkpoints under Israeli control versus under common control. That's really what you're saying.
It's either no, there should be no checkpoints, period. If you want, like I said, if you want checkpoints, build them on the green line.
All right,
Build as many as you want.
As the president, I am going to talk to the Palestinian people
Okay.
and tell them that there is a better option to have instead of having the Israeli police force, the Israeli.
You're going to talk to the Palestinians about wanting to continue a system of checkpoints. Do you know what they're going to say to you?
I'm going to work hard to undermine your.
That's fine, and I can go to these checkpoints are against international law. They divide Palestinian families.
I understand.
I am the one who's going to go and undermine you, not you undermine me.
All right. Okay. There's no point in beating this to death. I don't think that you are taking into consideration the political implication within the Palestinian, especially when Hamas already accepted this.
Okay. Sam Bahour lives not even 17 kilometers from my house. And it takes me sometimes 3 hours to go visit him.
Sam Bahour is not a.
But I'm just using him as an example. I want to be able to drive from Beit Hanina to which is a 10-15 minute drive. Why does that drive take me 3 hours? And I don't go through one Israeli house when I go to his house.
We will make the checkpoints a lot more accessible.
No, you remove them, period.
Okay.
That's it.
We are not the government, sir. We are not the government.
So that's why I'm vetoing this.
Okay, but you are not Israeli government. We are the common government. We cannot impose things on Israel, and we will try, but we cannot impose it on Israel. And I am going to speak to the Palestinian people, and I'm going to say,
good luck with that. It's not going to work.
Okay. You don't know.
Tony has a question, Joseph.
Okay. Go ahead.
You got to unmute, Tony.
Yes, I was. I'm just pointing out that this is an okay conversation in the simulation. Legislation got vetoed, and so it goes back to committee, and at a level that this simulation isn't able to do, there would be more dialogue about it, and maybe some refinement.
Yeah, I agree. This is, yeah, okay, let's go to the next.
Can I ask a question about checkpoints? I'm just curious. I'm not sure what checkpoints represent exactly. But would you entertain or anticipate a checkpoint between, I don't know, East and West Jerusalem, or between Kalkilia and Kfar Saba? I mean, do you, when you say checkpoint, do you imagine that there will be borders within the scope of two governments?
We are against borders. We are the president of the whole area, Israel, Palestine. If we are in favor of people, not land. We are not in favor of borders.
So there are no borders. So that when you say checkpoints here, you don't mean checkpoints between the Israeli and the Palestinian territories.
We mean the existing checkpoints. We do not delineate whether they are Israeli or Palestinian territory. We look at the checkpoints as an existing reality, and as the common government, we are trying to see what's possible to pass that would facilitate better life for Palestinians and Israelis within what's realistic. What would Israel not object to, and what the Palestinians not object? That's what
there are no checkpoints inside of Israel that Israelis have to deal with. So you're really talking only about checkpoints within the Palestinian territory. Is that what I'm supposed to assume?
The existing, we are not delineating it as Palestinian territory or Israeli territory. The checkpoints is a very clear, you have a picture right in front of you right now.
I don't need the picture.
Running away, and I am not willing to accept your description of as Israeli territory or Palestinian territory. We deal.
Okay. I think I get.
Okay, let's go to converting Kalandia into an education and commerce center. Charles, can you please read the legislation?
Converting Kalandia into an education and commerce center. Located on the main road between Ramallah and Jerusalem, this legislation seeks to reduce unnecessary hardship and congestion at the checkpoint without increasing security risk to the Palestinian or Israeli people. This includes the expansion of the number of entrances and exits, creating easy ingress and egress for both Palestinians and Israelis, a fast lane for frequent travelers, converting the entire area into an education and commercial zone, construction of a state-of-the-art hospital, including a children's hospital to serve Palestinians and Israelis. The entire area will be managed by the Confederation in cooperation with the Palestinian and Israeli authorities. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas, bestowing upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Lauren, let's have does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation?
Yes, I would be totally against it. Kalendi is part of the state of Palestine that maybe this confederation doesn't represent. And we have plans to reopen our airport in Kalendia. We have no intention to change the nature of the city to industrial zone.
Okay, I'm asking for questions. But go ahead.
You asked for comments. You said you're asking us to comment.
Okay. Do you see this legislation contradicting the Palestinian plans?
Yes.
In what way is it contradicting?
The Palestinians have defined what they want to do with this area, and I don't think they'll accept changing their thinking. Kalendia is
I'm asking, in what way is this legislation contradicting the Palestinian authorities' intentions?
The Palestinian government wants to put an airport where it was. You're suggesting putting a hospital there. I think that's a very big contradiction.
A hospital where the airport is?
Yeah, that's what you're saying, this area, you want to put a hospital there. I'm telling you, the Palestinians want to reconstitute the airport that was there and closed.
Okay.
Kalandia was an airport. That's where my father left to the US from.
Are you saying Kalandia was an airport before?
Yes, Kalandia was an airport that my father left to the US on. The Israelis
Okay.
occupied it, closed it down. The Palestinians want to recoup it to be able to reestablish the airport. You're
Okay,
projecting here something very different.
okay. So,
That's what you will come up against, things
okay,
like that.
so would the Palestinian Authority agree to cooperate with the common government to open a airport that would serve Israelis and Palestinians together?
I don't know.
Okay.
That was actually something that was proposed in the past, that at a Jerusalem International Airport
I
that would
know,
have two
but
terminals.
it failed in the past.
Yeah,
So
but
we
the
are a
area,
common government. We are saying, let's have an area that would serve Palestinians and Israelis together and would be managed and in cooperation, but would be managed by the common government.
yeah,
I
but
can accept it. I mean, I would accept it if it was in Modi'in, for example.
Mhm.
So we can reclaim some of our 48 areas through a project like this. That would be great.
Okay, and where is
I-
Modi'in? Where is Modi'in?
Moda'in is between the airport and Jerusalem on the edges. And actually Moda'in, I believe, is in 67 territory, Sam.
Half and half.
Half and half.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's have the, Don,
Wait.
raise your hand.
Wait,
I-
just a moment. I would like a word here. I'm all for hospitals. I'm all for centers. I'm for commercial zones where possible. In fact, I think I'd be for something like a common market in the entire area. What I don't understand is why Kalandia has to exist at all if we're having a joint policing, some form of collective security environment. Why would we maintain something like a place where you have to worry about improving egress? You said a moment ago that you're not talking about two different territorial entities, but you're talking here about a checkpoint which controls one population from one territory moving into another territory. And I think that this really is, I mean, as long as we're talking about ideal situations here in the future, in a hypothetical future, I think we should not valorize the existence of existing checkpoints, of which this is the most egregious.
I'm sorry, could you clarify your comments? I'm not sure if you're,
In other words,
Joseph, can I address Bernard's comment for a second?
yeah, sure.
Is that okay with you, Joseph?
yeah, sure.
I think what we're running up against here frequently in this simulation and in previous ones is kind of a misunderstanding between what the idea of the IPC, as we're speaking of it coming into existence, is, and what the idea of the simulation is. So the IPC, as it comes into existence, you know, we're adopting the assumptions of the simulation to say that this has come into existence. Now, does that mean that we have the power to tell Israel that you're going to do away with the checkpoints tomorrow? No. Does that mean that we have the ability to turn Kalandia into an airport tomorrow, or a hospital, or this or that? No. But what it does mean is that we're witnessing, in the process of playing this out, what operating by these rules a common body of people can do who currently don't have any political power or ability to cooperate with each other, how they can pressure the existing governments to come to forms of agreement that is beneficial to both sides. It's not about having an ideal, either an Israeli ideal or a Palestinian ideal. It's about what is happening today. Where are things at today? And given that's the case, if this came into existence, what would be the next step? Where can we go from there? So I think
Yeah.
if you approach it with that kind of an understanding, you'll have a better idea of what we're trying to go for here.
And we ask you to judge the plan based on the alternative, not based on perfection. And I feel that the objections that I get here are, this is not perfect, but you're not suggesting an alternative. And just to say, well, we want this and we want that, is without saying, how do you get there? And not admitting the failure that you've had for years is not really a fair analysis of the IPC. You have to show a reasonable alternative, not just say this is not perfect.
That's not fair.
Joseph, may I make a comment
That's not
on your
fair because
methodology?
Yeah, because you're saying we want to build an
Yeah.
airport. We want.
In your
Yes.
methodology,
You haven't
of-
built an
in the
airport for 50
methodology of the
years.
simulation,
You
need to
haven't
give
built an
space.
airport for, you haven't built that airport for 50 years. You're just saying we are going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're saying you're gonna do that here as well, it's both hallucinations. But in your
Joseph,
simulation,
all-
you need to introduce space for people to make the case of the alternative. You can't claim someone is not making an alternative and you don't let us finish a sentence to make a comment. So you need to introduce.
Okay, but
for the
look, there-
legislation
you
discussion.
haven't been able to build an airport for at least 55 years. Okay?
We can have that discussion, but I don't think we want
We
to.
don't want to have Calandia because we are keeping it for a future airport. To me, it sounds like you just don't want it. You don't want the common government to succeed. And you are presenting issues that not in good faith. Quite,
Well, an airport
wanna
instead
have
of a
that
hospital.
conversation.
instead of arguing, let's take a
Want to have
vote.
that conversation, create the space for us to do it. Don't assume anything.
Let's take, yeah,
that's
I
not,
agree.
that's,
I
but that's
agree,
not
I
fair.
agree.
I've
I just wanna
proposed,
make
I've
a
said to you, if you
comment
want to
here.
build
Wait,
checkpoints, build them
let's-
on your
let's take a-
borders.
We have to take a vote. Do you support converting the Calandia check
Build your-
to Palestinian parliament members? Please vote.
But you're saying that we don't offer another solution. Build your checkpoints, but build them around your cities, around your houses, not between Palestinian houses. This is the alternative that I propose every single time I'm here.
Okay.
And I just want to make a comment. You know, this is a simulation, and I think that the debate and the dialogue is what's important in understanding what a confederation can do. The fact that these discussions, I wouldn't even try to weigh in on these because I'm not nearly knowledgeable enough here in the US, but if there was a confederation and these conversations were taking place at a high level, we should think about what that could lead to, not necessarily what we're looking
Exactly. I
as
agree.
an
I agree.
imaginary, as a simulation.
I agree. Completely agree. The purpose is to demonstrate, not to beat each other up. And I agree with you completely. Okay, let's end the polling. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Okay, share the result. 57%. So this legislation did not pass the Palestinian parliament members. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Israeli parliament members. I don't see the vote. Israeli parliament members. Okay. So stop sharing. 67% of the Israeli parliament members. So there is no point in going to the legislation has not passed. So we are not going to the separate governments to ask for their veto because the legislation has not passed. Okay. So it's after participating in this union, do you support a common government for the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza? Let's do a post-simulation survey. We want to go to a question and answer. Now, everyone vote. Okay, stop sharing. Share results. Okay, 84% voted yes, and 16% voted no. So the result was better at the end than it was at the beginning. At the beginning, 80% voted yes. Now 84% voted yes. So despite our disagreements on the legislation, it looks like people understood the process, and that's really what's important. It's not to beat each other up on each legislation. So if anyone is willing to record a video before we go to the question and answer right now, say my name is whatever, and whatever your name is, and I support the common government, that would be appreciated. And we can do it right now. I'm going to stop sharing. And if you are willing to record a video stating that you are in support, do I have any volunteers? Please raise your hand or just speak up. Does anyone is willing to? I don't see any. We had people in the past, so okay. So now let's go back to the PowerPoint and okay. I believe that what we need is a awareness that that a Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to be resolved, and it can be resolved by a common government. Just like we need an article in the paper, that would discuss, just like it was discussed in the Me Too movement that changed the world with the Me Too movement. If you can write a letter to Thomas Friedman and to Tony Blair. Tony Blair actually is interested in participating in the simulation. I give you, and to Gideon Levy. Gideon Levy participated in 2 of our simulations. Ralph Nader, we're inviting him, but he's not responding. And then let's go now to the open discussion and have people ask our guests questions. Janine,
Janine's hand is up.
Your hand.
Yes. Yes, please.
Did you raise your hand to support?
Yeah, I supported it. Yes.
Okay. Are you willing to record a video supporting that?
Yes.
Okay, but we don't see your face very well. Can you?
Oh, sorry.
Can you?
I hope it's better now. Can you see me?
Yeah, bring it up a little bit.
Oh, okay. There we are.
Yeah,
That's
perfect.
better, yes.
Okay, go ahead and record.
What do I have to press? What
Say your
button?
name. Nothing. Just say your name and.
Oh, Janine Laura Bronson.
Okay, so say your name and say I support the common government and say why.
I support the common Israeli-Palestinian government. The reason is very simple. Up until now, you mentioned so many years, 75, that there hasn't yet been a successful Israeli-Palestinian togethership, or I don't know what to call it, but for the lack of words, there certainly is a good intention. And peace, I think, is a mesh. It's a joining together, it's tolerance, it's adhesiveness as opposed to separateness. And in order for things to get better, if we have more agreement, usually, from my experience, it's something middle ground or that is accepting of both sides. And when you have that, you look not so much at the extremes on the edges, because there's always going to be
Someone mute, please? Aaron Good, can you please mute yourself?
Thank
Aaron?
you, it's better now. Yeah, so the point that I wanted to make, and this is where my previous question is pertinent. You say
Wait.
in
we're
this
not gonna-
simulation, this is reason
Are you asking a
why
question?
tolerance makes sense. Yeah, the reason why I agree with the Israeli-Palestinian, not only the simulation, but I hope it will become a reality in real life that this government will exist, is that
Okay.
we in our hearts, we want to be together and we want to recognize what is similar with the other side. And for that to happen, when in this simulation today, we mention teaching tolerance, Hebrew and Arabic, we didn't think until now that maybe there's another language to teach that would help that come about.
Okay, can you mute Aaron Good? Can you please mute Aaron Good?
Is Dan here?
Dan, can you please mute
I don't see
Aaron
Dan.
Good?
I don't see Dan. Oh, host Dan. There he goes. He's muted.
Allow Americans who didn't like Jews to change their minds as the progress, just as he changed by falling in love with ours.
Joseph, mute everybody.
The message of whose land it belonged to was
Could be Esther Robbins
the
too.
theme music to the film by Ernest Gold was subsequently given.
Aaron, can you mute? Dan, can you mute?
This land is not.
There we go.
Okay. All right, let's go to questions. If you have any questions of our guests, then that's the time you can present your plan and whatever. Then, Charles, can you manage the question and answers? Charles?
Samir has a question.
Okay. Samir, did you have a question for?
Not a question. I have a comment. And
Okay.
you know, hi everybody. Joseph, I got to know you for the last 15 years, and you had your project, the IPC, and you've been working at it for the last 15 years. So far, you didn't succeed into making it reality in Israel, Palestine. And I suggested to you just a few weeks ago for you.
I'm going there in November.
That's right. Okay, well, you should have gone now. But anyway, you planned it for November. You need to go now. I mean, it's happening now.
November.
Reality is happening right now. And I just want to let you know that from what we're seeing, if you go right now, what are you going to find in Israel, Palestine? You will find 51% of the Israeli population are deplorables. And you will find 49% of the Israeli population are pro-democracy. And among the pro-democracy, there is the anti-occupation movement. And if you go there right now, that's what you need to get into. You need to work with the anti-occupation movement and take it to the next level, anti-apartheid. Anti-occupation and anti-apartheid for one state, one democratic state, to work for one democratic state. Because I mean, you have already one apartheid state, you need to just change it to one democratic state of Palestine, Israel. And it might take, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, just like in South Africa 33 years ago. At the end, that's the solution, you win. But bringing to the IPC right now to them, and the reality is different in Israel. Neither the Israelis want it, neither the Palestinians, or the Palestinians actually, they are victims. They are under occupation. They cannot even vote. They cannot even vote for their own government. The PA is like a dictatorship for the last 15 years. So you're dealing with reality. Reality is one state, one apartheid state, and you need to change it into one democratic state.
Joseph, are we going to give time to our guests to speak? Because this is we're at 10:42 here, and
sorry, I shouldn't have called on Samir. I meant to.
All right, I finished. This is my suggestion.
Thank you, Samir. Sam and Bernard, who wants to go first?
You can go first. I'll keep my comments brief because I know time is limited. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to witness this. It taught me a lot. First, it taught me and reinforced why I'm not a politician. But more seriously, Bernie and I have, I think, correctly took a decision a while ago that it is not constructive to promote the thinking around Confederation by starting in the weeds. We need to start with a set of principles that define a joint future and allow and respect both parties to have the intellect and the space to be able to work in the weeds in a real way, not in an artificial way. And I think that's one of my reactions to this stimulation. Also, as I tried to mention in the beginning, ignoring land as a core element of this conflict is a naive approach to any kind of peace effort in the future, given it is the core of this conflict. As the stimulation was going on, I was watching the logo and it hit me. This is not Israel-Palestine Confederation. You've called it Israeli-Palestinian in terms of, and now I understand why land is omitted. You're talking about two peoples coming together and creating a joint body. Well, we should try that with Mexico and the US as well, given we're not caring about the states, but we're caring about the peoples. And of course, they're not going to stop it because it has zero impact on anything other than a Zoom call. So you can have an artificial creation, but in serious approach to Confederation, I think it does a disservice talking about peoples in Confederation when the word Confederation, as I understand it, is about states that are in Confederation. We can discuss which states and in what configuration, but it's not peoples in general. The other thing I would mention is, and I heard this across the discussion, we're starting with today, we're starting with what we have. That is a very hard place for any Palestinian to swallow. If I come to your house tonight and take 3/4 of your house, move my family in, and tell you, let's create a common reality today with the reality that we have. I'm in your bathroom, in your kitchen, but I left you the bedroom. You would not accept that. We cannot accept, we should not as humans accept a total illegal reality as a starting point. And the last thing I'll say, as I understood Bernie and myself's articulation of Confederation, very relevant to the discussion today. Our Confederation is more like a marriage agreement. Two adults, two independent states come into an agreement with what they can come into an agreement with, and it can be expanded over time. And there needs to be built-in mechanisms how to hold the parties accountable to that agreement. Just like two humans come into marriage, and you have the law that dictates that you can't beat your wife because she didn't make dinner. What we're talking about here is kind of like bringing in a third adult into the house to be the mediator, to be the common person between us, to clean the bedroom because nobody wants to clean the bathroom. I don't think that works. I think maybe 50 years later, after a confederation of the two states is created, a more commonality of governance can take place. But I think the beginning point is an agreement on specific items, and the two states are the key players here. The agreement is just to make those states facilitate common issues in a more easier way. And I'll stop there.
Can I respond to that? Charles?
Yeah, of course.
The Confederation does not preclude any other solution. It does not preclude the Israeli or the Palestinian governments agreeing on anything, including institutions. But the reality is that they failed to do so. So why would you preclude a common government when we are not precluding the states, the Israeli or the Palestinian governments from agreeing there? The reason is.
Can I answer that?
Sure. Why would you preclude a common government? Why would you be against the idea? If you're truly for peace, you would say, let's try everything and whatever works is fine. But to say, well, I am against the common government and I just want my solution to be implemented, to me, that questions your desire for peace.
Okay. I don't think Sam and I are precluding a common government at some point in the future. The Confederation in Europe.
Not at some point in the future.
Joseph, let me finish.
Yeah, give Bernard the floor.
The European Union started as the steel and coal agreement between France and Germany in 1953. And it built, and it built, and it built, and it built, and it built until the idea of some kind of common government, at least is starting to look plausible, at least since the introduction of the euro. We can talk about the fate of the European Union another time, but I'm just saying the same was true of Canada. To speak of confederation beginning with the hardest thing, when in fact this is a very valuable approach and we don't want to discredit it by creating a whole bunch of hypothetical things that are really not speaking to the realities on the ground. I want to say one more thing about peoples. You use the term peoples, Sam used the term peoples. Janine spoke about Esperanto. That's very dear to my heart. It was started in Białystok, Poland, where my father was from. Okay. And we can talk about a single state, or we can talk about some kind of union where everyone's speaking a nicely accented English. We don't need Esperanto. We can just speak a nicely accented English. Sam and I can have our conversation. I can have a conversation with the Palestinians who speak English, and they can have the same conversations with Israelis. But for the most part, when we talk about peoples, we're talking about people living in a cultural reality, a linguistic cultural reality, in this case, inflected also by religious traditions, which make them distinct on different lands. And I think most of us would reasonably believe that there ought to be governments where the political borders more or less overlap the cultural borders. And that those two distinct peoples living in two distinct territories, more or less, I know there are all kinds of problems now with regard to the settlers and with regard to the Arab minority in Israel and so on. All of that has to be taken into account. So both have to be democratic states with the possibility of having residents who are not part of the majority population. That's a reality also on the ground. But more or less, we're talking about two distinct governments representing two distinct peoples, and there has to be some kind of border around them. That border should be dotted line, not straight line. It should be very easy to penetrate. It should be part of some kind of joint collective security environment. There should be a common market. There should be all kinds of shared jurisdictions where these things cannot be separated. Sam and I have made that case again and again, and we should be talking about this idea in a way that actually makes it look attractive to people on the ground today who have despaired of the idea of creating two states because they can't really see a way forward to solve the problems that are on the ground today. So I think we should be talking about confederation for sure. It would be wonderful to talk about in the end, when all of these joint projects are created or these institutions that represent shared jurisdictions where they cannot be separated, like water or sewage or something like that. If we do that, we can say, and in the far distant future, it would be wonderful to have a joint confederal government. Who knows? Maybe the Jordanians would also be part of it. Maybe there would be a larger regional confederation, not just a two-state confederation. But I don't want to discredit a very good idea, which we have to sell to the parts. I won't speak about numbers and percentages, but let's say parts of the Israeli world who are not, as they were called, deplorables. There are people who are looking for a way forward to think about a reciprocal peace in a situation where you can't possibly separate into two separate states that have nothing to do with each other. You can't have two states that have nothing to do with each other when the distance between Herzliya and Nablus is the distance between Newark Airport and Kennedy Airport. So you've got to have some way of thinking about how these two entities will interact. Talking at this point about a joint government feels to me that we are making the reasonable impossible. And we're forcing people to discuss something which is so long-term and so fatuous at this point that we are not going to talk seriously about a very good idea. I'll end with that.
Jack.
Yes, I'm next.
Yeah,
Hi.
Jackie, and then
Yeah.
Shlomo, and then Sean. And then
My remarks are going to be very short. I'm having recently returned from Israel and the West Bank. I would like to, I've been thinking that what we need is immediate measures of goodwill. I agree with Bernard Avishai about on his remarks, but I'd like to propose, for instance, examples. Stop home demolitions. We can do that yesterday. Stop evictions. I think these would be goodwill measures that would really resonate with Palestinians. There's no reason why we can't do this immediately.
Well,
Can I add another goodwill?
The Israeli government. How are you going to force the Israeli government to stop demolition, and how are you going to force the Israeli? You're missing the whole point.
No, I'm not missing the whole point. I think it's a lot easier than your proposals. Your proposals
Well, then do it.
Down the road. We can do this.
So what prevents you from doing it?
Well, that's another story about making the occupation more visible, more prominent among the demonstrators, among the protesters. That's actually the job right now.
I agree. And one, I can think of another goodwill gesture, which is to make it much easier for people like Sam, who came from Youngstown, Ohio, to come to Palestine, set up residence, set up businesses. It took Sam 15 years to get permanent residency in Palestine. And it's absurd. It's absurd from the point of view of the democratic part of the Israeli population, not to see how silly it is, how self-destructive it is, not to allow tens of thousands of Palestinians who have entrepreneurial ideas like Sam did, to not allow them to come. Who is going to build the Palestinian state, the Palestinian entity, if not people like Sam?
All right, let's go to Shlomo and then Sean and then Nasir.
A quick question to Bernard. By the way, I agree with most of what you said, if not everything. But when you talk about this confederation, do you envision still two-state solution, but one step ahead of it, or how exactly it differs from two-state solution?
The answer is that I think I can speak for Sam here, although you can go ahead, Sam, as well. I think both of us envision two states sharing what can be shared, what must be shared, and having jurisdictions over what they must have for themselves. I can easily imagine two states with two different legal criminal law systems, two different judiciaries and legal systems. I can imagine two states with two different educational systems. I can see two different police forces, although they would, I believe, have to cooperate jointly on those things that affect the common peace. And that's not going to be a simple issue. But, you know, common market, absolutely. Joint epidemiological institutions, so that if you get COVID in Ramallah, it will be halted in Ramallah and not infect Nablus and not infect Tel Aviv. There are all kinds of ways in which such small little city states that are cheek by jowl together, all together the size of greater LA, just this two little things, that they have to share many institutions, just bandwidth for the phones. They have to be shared. Those things should be shared. I'm not sure they need a common government to be shared. Each one of these jurisdictions could have a separate third-party institution for mediation. I don't know. But I do see two states because I see two peoples. I see two distinct nations with different conceptions of their history, which may not be reconcilable, nor need they be reconcilable. The important thing is to cooperate on those things where you cannot separate. And that's a lot of things in this little territory.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any place for the IPC to somehow merge with it, or this is just futuristic, and what do you think?
Look, I have nothing but respect for Joseph and other people in America who are proposing and advancing confederal ideas. The first thing I wrote about confederation was 1989. Sam and I wrote a piece about this back in 2010. Then we wrote about it some more. We called it dependence and interdependence. These things are important ideas. We have to sell them. They're very important ideas. We have to sell them. We can't sell them by having people be forced to entertain ideas that are so hypothetical and so detailed in ways that in a way get away from the principles themselves. That you know, if this is what confederation is, it's like Sam's saying, well, let's play Monopoly. You know, let's play Risk. If this is what confederation is, let's play a board game. I feel like this is too valuable an idea to be discredited by overproducing it, if you know what I mean.
All right, let's go to Sean.
Joseph, I just want to make this quick. You have this is something out of the question and not what we're talking. You have Sam and Bernard who come and dispute with you about the IPC, and they had their open thoughts about it. But I'm actually worried about the other things going on. But I'm sure you dealt with the smear campaign that people who don't like IPC and want to try to smear it as a how are you going to deal with those smear campaigns? It's glad you had some people who will come and discuss things with you and then have their debates, but there's some out there that will try to devalue us, try to degrade us, and there's going to be an uphill battle with those smear campaigns who will try to bring down the IPC. So how are you doing? How are you going to deal with that?
Well, it depends how they try to smear it. And most of the people that I am encountering, they're trying to smear me personally. Okay?
You know what? And I bet you want to propose this IPC to the Israeli and Palestinian, great. But for some reason, the Israeli government will tell its Israeli people, oh, don't allow IPC. They are anti-Semitic. They want to destroy Israel. They'll start to bring up all these allegations against us to discourage Israeli to advocate for the IPC, and this is what I'm seeing. And then there's going to be those uphill battle coming up against us, and it wasn't the first time. It will not be the last time. So
no, I agree. I agree. This is why we do the simulations. And look, we got 80% of the people here supporting it, and then it went up to 84%, just an hour and a half. Okay, so.
Yeah, and then the Israeli will start to bring new propagandas, and all that. They'll not stop. They'll continue doing that.
Yeah. All right,
I already know people who do. Okay. Anyway.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Nasir and then Charles.
Thank you, Joseph. Joseph, although I can be very critical, I don't want to. I mean, you're a really good person, and I read what you write, and we do agree on probably 99% of things. But what concerns me about what I hear a lot during our simulations, and I want to ask Sam and Bernard about this, is that fundamental things like checkpoints, like Palestinian, like, for example, Sam's experience with getting residency took him 15 years. And this happens, to me. I've spoken to Sam about this, about, residency rights and things like this that, we're struggling to get. I don't think these are, like you're saying, oh, well, the situation with Colombia can be better. Do you prefer it to be worse than worse, which is right now, or to get better? But for me, it's like, these are fundamental things, like Jacqueline said, that should have been done yesterday. And when you ask Palestinians to sacrifice on these very basic things, to me, it makes everything illegitimate, because we shouldn't have to sacrifice whether there should be a checkpoint, or Palestinians don't have the right to live in their the city where their father was born or where they were born, or to apply for residency or go open businesses. It's not like we're asking, I want to go back to Haifa and rebuild a Palestinian community there. We're not asking for this, but you're asking, and not just the IPC, but in general, the failure of every peace proposal is that it's Palestinians who are asked to make the sacrifices. It's Palestinians who are asked to back down on their demands, on their rights. And I think that this is just fundamentally wrong.
Nasir, that's not true what you're saying. It's not.
But you just said that.
Actually, you are proposing the Palestinian to continue to sacrifice, and you're the one who are really not providing any alternative.
But I did. I said, if you want a checkpoint, build it around Israeli towns and homes, not in between Palestinian ones.
But that's complete misrepresentation. I didn't say I want checkpoints. Okay.
But your legislation provides it provides a new system for checkpoints. It needs to be removed.
To be honest with you, I feel that you are not able to see things objectively. You see things exclusively as Palestinians, and you want a Palestinian victory here. And I am not against Palestinian victory. I am in favor of.
Okay, so the question I have for our guest is, can any confederation, for a confederation model to work, does certain things have to be built, take into place immediately, such as, for example, the end of the occupation, such as the stop of the destruction, Palestinian rights to, because what's happening is, Bernard, for example, he used the example of Germany versus, and France, how the EU was started. But at the same time, Germany wasn't shrinking. Palestinian land is shrinking. Settlements are expanding. Lands are being seized. It's like the carpet is being pulled from beneath our feet. And by the time we negotiate and talk, there's going to be nothing left. And this is what a concern, a serious concern. Germany is not shrinking while they were negotiating the EU. So it makes it different.
You asked the question, if I can try to answer very briefly. I would add one principle in the beginning of any discussion about IPC, which is we respect international law. If there's not a baseline that the world in its entirety has accepted, and for much of it, Israel as well, then what we're doing is total fantasy. There needs to be a starting point, which is a baseline, which is neither Israel nor Palestinian, nor the common government. It has to be a reference point. Actually, it's the reference point to every sovereign state out there today. And then we kick in with the support, which would be the second point of we want to hold the parties accountable to that. And that's what I think Jacqueline was, who was saying, stop the hemorrhaging now. The common government is not going to do what the international community in its entirety could not do. And the flaw of why it couldn't do, Joseph, was
On
because
what basis do you say that? On what?
Because it gave a veto power to 5 parties.
Okay,
Thus, it could
not to 5
implement
parties, to
international
3
law.
parties.
Don't make the same mistake by giving the parties
But you
who
saw
have
them.
a vested interest veto power.
But you are completely ignoring that this is a different constellation.
Any constellation which is bringing peoples to the table have to have a baseline. And the baseline is not.
It has a constitution.
No,
It has a
no, your
constitution.
baseline is.
What do you mean,
Let's
no? It has a
propose
constitution.
something and
You
tell
cannot
the vested
ignore-
parties
you cannot
that they
ignore
can
the
do a
consti-
veto. That doesn't make sense, Joseph.
Any democracy has a constitution. You're ignoring it. You are ignoring.
I'm not ignoring it. You gave
Yes,
somebody
you are.
veto power. You constitutionalized a veto power.
Correct.
The same thing the United Nations Security Council did. Thus, they became unable to hold the parties accountable because of the veto party. You want to mimic that here.
Do you know that the United States has a veto power? Do you know that? That's
No, the model, you're giving
the
vested
Constitution of the
interested
United
parties.
States gives the President of the United States a veto power. And why is he not exercising his veto? Because he will pay political price.
No, and because there's something called 2 bodies of legislation that can override that veto party at a specific percentage. There's bodies of, it's not one party, it's executive branch, legislative branch, 2 parties with 2 branches of the legislative body. So there's an entire systems of checks and balances.
Okay,
That's why
so-
Israel's falling apart today.
Okay, but overriding a veto is not going to be acceptable.
My point is very simple, Joseph. If you give the vested parties a veto power, none of what you're talking about will pass. Nothing, not one thing.
How do you know that? How do you know that? You're just making that. You have no basis whatsoever.
Listen, can we
I
sort of?
kind of do because I read history and I'm a
No, you
party
do
here.
not know.
Yeah,
But
Sam.
you can't say it's going to happen as
We've
well. So it has to
We've
be
been
Drop
doing
the
these
volume.
simulations
Drop the volume.
over 3 years. And you just making a statement without any.
Wait a second. Can we?
You were
sort
really
of-
interested in peace, you would say, let's try to see it. If 5 million people voted, it would be very difficult for the parties to veto it. That's the whole point. You're missing the point.
No, I'm not missing the point. To get
Yeah,
5
you are,
million
because
to
you're
vote,
making
it's hallucination.
you're making a statement that has no basis.
It's based on
Guys,
analysis.
guys,
just like this
guys,
entire
can
simulation.
I-
It's based on
can I break
analysis.
in here a
You
second?
have no
Can I-
basis upon which to make that statement.
Can I break in here a
You have
second?
no
Because
statement. You can laugh as much as you want.
Just
No basis to make that statement.
can I say, I
Really
fear,
interested in peace, you would say, let's do it. And if it passes, fine. If it doesn't, there is no harm.
Before Bernie speaks, with all due respect, I shouldn't question our interest in peace. We wouldn't be here if that was the case, Joseph. That goes beyond a civil discussion. Because I have a different opinion, you cannot challenge my interest in peace.
That's my opinion, that
And I stated my opinion.
okay, but we say, look, we say we are interested in peace, we are interested in all formulas. Okay?
I think
Undo this
that-
formula. That's what you're saying.
I think the issue of a constitution is getting us into a bad place. And anyway, it's begging the question. I think the real question is, do these three entities actually, in fact, have a veto? And of course they do. In other words, we
What
have
do you
to
mean?
come
What
up.
do you mean? There are the entities
In other
do
words,
not exist. The entities do
Yeah,
not.
yeah. That's what he just said, Joseph.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying, instead of talking about some fanciful constitution, we should just acknowledge that there is a leadership in Ramallah, there's a leadership in Gaza, a leadership in Jerusalem. They all have, in effect, vetoes right now. You have to
They're all
present
illegitimate institutions. They're all of them are illegitimate.
Okay, I don't know what that means. All I'm saying.
I'll tell you what it means. They're not.
No, don't
the
tell
people.
me what it means. Don't tell me
You
what it
said
means.
you don't know. I'm telling you, they're not elected by the people. They're institutions, and you
Okay.
want to respect them as if they are legitimate. And I am saying, let's create a legitimate common government. And you say, no, let's pay attention to the illegitimate governments. That's what you're saying.
No, what I'm saying is there are three forces on the ground right now, which are in effect exercising a veto over any chance of moving forward. So what we have to do is we have to think of some conception of justice that is so attractive that it's going to actually create those forces to withdraw their veto over a continuing peace process. And so that's
the
all I'm
common
saying.
government. That's exactly the common government you're proposing. We are
Does sound very similar.
Excuse me, what?
Was
I'm
that
not talking about a common government. I'm talking, it may well be.
I know the description you give fits the common government perfect. You said let's find
I understand, but what Sam was saying before, and I'd be the last person on earth to understand internal Palestinian politics, but what Sam was saying before is that the part of the force in the Palestinian world that has the most legitimacy is the Palestine Liberation Organization. And they may wish over a period of time, and may be able over a period of time, to integrate Hamas into that organization and present a common negotiating team, common platform for the development of a confederation with Israel. I think that is, if we're going to be hopeful, that is the most hopeful possible future, where Gaza is reintegrated into Palestine, and all the Palestinian communities in this little territory here speak with some united leadership. I think that was all that Sam was implying, and we should create some kind of vision of the future which is so attractive that might in fact be possible.
All right, let's go to Len, and Oren, I'm going to recognize you after Len.
Okay, okay, that's my.
It's a quarter after 9 here, in Jerusalem and Ramallah. I'm just telling you, I haven't had dinner yet. My wife is waiting for me. Can we just put like 10 minutes more and that's it?
You could leave. We will.
Okay.
Joseph,
No, don't
I was
leave
in
yet,
the
Bernie.
queue before Len.
Okay, Bernie, I too come from Montreal, so I know your background. I am very appreciative of you and Sam today. I think you have given a lot of practical information. I agree with what Sam says in that we have to respect international law, and international law goes back to 1920 and the San Remo Accords, which established the boundaries of what is now Israel. But also that a lot of water has passed under the bridge. I was in Israel, I was in Egypt and Israel in 1980. And with my wife and I alone in a rented car, we went driving into Gaza and drove around. There were no checkpoints, there was nothing. There were no checkpoints until Arafat started the second Intifada and murdered a lot of people when he refused having a separate.
That's not true. That's not true. The second Intifada was in 2000, and there was checkpoint. Erez checkpoint has been around before 2000. So stop. You always give these.
Okay,
you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I drove into Gaza. There were no.
I've driven into Gaza, and I've never. There was checkpoints even before the second Intifada. I drove from Jerusalem to Gaza.
Are you
there was
let
checkpoints.
Me speak, Nasser?
Well, don't lie, because you always come up with these lies.
Well, I didn't interrupt you, and back in those days, the Gaza beaches were favorite places for Israeli young people.
But you said after the second Intifada, only the checkpoints came. That is not true.
And Nasir.
But this is the same guy who said Arab men want to rape Jewish women. He always says this crazy stuff.
I said a comment on rape.
You said that before previously in this group.
I never said that Arab women are raping Jewish.
No, you said Arab men want to rape Jewish women. You've said that before.
You're full of malarkey.
You're full of malarkey. Grew along with the settlements. Can we just agree that checkpoints grew along with the settlements?
Len, what is your question? Len, what is your question?
My comment was that I'm appreciative these people are offering some practicality, and I have everything we talk about. I never hear anything of saying what the Arabs, what the Palestinians, what the PLO will do to help the process along. And as far as you, Jacqueline, you don't like construction. Well, a lot of the houses that you're talking about are houses that the Jews were thrown out of in 1948. And also there are 81,000 illegal Arab houses in the Area C, which is strictly under Israeli control. So these are all illegal too. And
total nonsense.
Everything is nonsense to you, Shlomo.
Let's go to Oren. Oren was our guest last time. So
hello, everybody. Hello, Bernard and Sam and Joseph. 2 weeks ago, I presented here the ideas of a land for all, which is a confederation movement. And it echoes to some extent what the discussion was then. And I very much concur with what Bernard and Sam were saying about it's impossible to override the right and the aspiration of the two people for self-determination. This is why confederation, successful confederation, also in history, always are built up from bottom up. The people give up, they allocate power to other authorities for joint government. And very much so with issues that don't go into the heart of self-determination, not education, not police, which is, the right for violence is one of the most rights of a sovereign, but environment, economics, immigration, outside security, things that are not so controversial, it can actually work. This is why I echo very much that we need to join hands. And the 3 or 4 groups, only 3 or 4 groups that support confederation should work together. And very, very much, this is why I attend some of these very good seminars that Joseph is conducting. But I do concur with the fear that we can overdo it. And this is why I want to lend my hand to the caution. And I didn't really realize, Joseph, that the IPC is more or less just a one-state idea, the way you presented it today. And correct me if I'm wrong, I might have misunderstood, but having a police force, having checkpoints everywhere, developing Kalandia, which is such a sensitive area for Palestinians, which was annexed illegally by Israel, by a force that comes from above, this will obviously, be encountered by incredible opposition of Palestinians, and if it happens inside Israel, also by Israelis. So why not build up confederation from bottom up, from these two peoples that know that they need some common areas of government, rather than impose it from above? This is my question, and the confederation idea is so important. It's the only potential to break the deadlock that we have now.
Right.
that I think maybe we should have a conference, the Confederation groups. Let's have a conference to discuss that before we ruin this idea for the public discourse.
Oren Mabruk, and I am going to have to say goodnight. I'm very glad Oren had, for me, the last word. It was very valuable. Thank you,
Yes,
Joseph,
thank you.
for the
Thank you.
invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
you.
Charles, I apologize.
Can I? Well, here's the thing. Sam and Bernard Avishai have both left. But I wanted to point out that they have a problem with us giving a veto power to these existing governments. And yet their proposal, and I believe yours, Oren, I'm not sure about this, but suggests that this cooperation is going to happen from the existing governments. Does anybody not understand that that is an existing veto? Okay, Bernard acknowledged it at the end, but yeah, effectively, there are these three centers of powers and they do effectively have a veto. So why do we have a problem with this veto power? And to Nasir and Jacqueline, I have to say, we're not expecting anybody to sacrifice anything. We're offering a tool for you to get more of what you want now, and possibly as that grows, your vision of the future will coalesce with enough other people that you'll get everything that you want, but it'll look a little different by the time it gets there. And I think you have to be able to accept that, or nothing's going to change.
Let me tell you the problem with that, Charles.
Because everybody
Kalandia
right
Airport
now,
right now there's a plan to build homes, an Israeli settlement at the place where the Kalandia Airport. So while you're telling me to wait and to be patient and stuff, there's going to be a huge settlement built on the site of Kalandia Airport. So there'll be nothing to negotiate afterwards.
Nasir, you're confusing.
Yeah, but this is the same thing. Like, just be patient. It'll come. It's not.
Nasir, you don't understand that the simulation is just to show how legislation could pass or not pass. We are not the common government. We are just simulating.
Yeah, I understand, but again,
so if you're saying don't start there, start somewhere else, that would be up to the common government. It's not. We are not the common government.
Then what are you doing here?
You're taking this legislation too seriously.
But
if you want to stop them building in those places where you don't want them to build, you're going to have to build the political power in order to be able to do that, right?
But that was what I was saying. There is a political protest movement in Israel. What it's lacking is attention to the occupation. And if it
Correct.
More attention, then they could do first steps like stopping the evictions and stopping the building. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the political demonstrations in Israel are to create a Jewish democracy. They are not speaking in terms of democracy with the Palestinians.
Giving Palestinians rights. I wanted to point out.
Democracy.
I wanted to point out one other thing about that veto, and that is that if both Gaza, if both Hamas and the PA have a veto power, wouldn't that immediately give them more incentive to cooperate, so that neither one, so that they would agree with each other, okay, we're not going to veto this, right? They would have to work together. And I just see that most of the objections that people have, I'm not in Palestine. I have never even visited Israel. I've been in Jordan and Syria, but I've never been in Palestine or Israel. So I cannot speak to the influences that you are feeling there on the ground.
Can I make
But
one
but I
comment?
have this perception that we become too ingrained in the immediate conflict that we would like to see remedied, and we're missing the motivations behind that conflict, which have to be ameliorated before those conflicts can be resolved.
Charles, can you take over?
I would like to, let me just say one thing. I think we talk about worrying about whether an airport or a hospital. The answer is they need two states. They need to set up a border, and everybody can do whatever they want on their side of the border. I think the only people that are going to help the Israelis and the PLO solve this problem is the Arab League. The Americans, the Europeans, and certainly the United Nations have zero credibility. But the Arab League are the people that have influence both with Israel and with the PLO. And the answer is, and that's why I agree with these two gentlemen that were here today, you have to have two separate countries, do whatever you want to, be democratic, be not democratic, it's your business, but have two countries and build whatever you want on your side of the border, including if you want to start bringing in people like Sam from the United States and give them residency and all that. But you first of all,
But Len, there aren't two countries.
There are.
There's one country and there's a military occupation.
No, there isn't.
And there's no
see,
incentive. There's no incentive in the Israeli government right now that controls everything to allow another country to come into existence. How is that going to happen?
I think you're wrong. The Trump proposal a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, Israel accepted it. Israel accepted it with Clinton. Israel accepted it in 1947. Israel accepted it in 1967. The Arabs have refused to allow any infidel entity in any part of there. So Israel is willing, the Arabs are not willing.
Okay,
and that's why I'm saying,
that's your
that's
point
why
of view.
I'm saying the Arab League is the major point of influence here. And the point is that once you have separate countries, you know, if they want to build an airport or they want to build a hospital, that'll be their choice.
Yeah, along the what border? Along the 67, pre-67 border? Yes.
No.
Oh, no, of course not. No, you want it all, right? That's it. That's the truth,
No,
right?
I don't want that. I want them to make a peace treaty and make a settlement.
A peace treatment between the ghettos. Between the ghettos and
Len,
Israel.
nothing prevents a peace treaty. Okay?
That's right. That's right.
Nothing prevents a peace treaty.
Right.
Nothing prevents the Israeli and the Palestinian. But let's be honest, they haven't been able to succeed in doing it. Okay.
That's right, because they
did not succeed in doing it.
And so what does that mean?
They are not in what?
So what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. There are a lot of countries that don't have peace treaties.
Because they are not did not succeed, you try something else.
I agree. And my suggestion is the Arab League.
Okay. Can I talk? You talk and you answer. It's my turn, okay?
Yeah.
I would like to agree 100% with Oren and with the two gentlemen, and especially Oren's point that we need to unite, to join forces and to take advantage of this momentum of talking and being a kind of confederation, one way or another. We have to unite somehow and take it forward in whatever way we can. I don't know exactly how, and I definitely would give Oren the stage to explain exactly how he thinks this can be done.
Well, just so that in Van Leer Institute, next week, on the 10th and 11th of May, in 10 days, we have a large conference of the first of its kind, where it says Israel-Palestinian partnership-based peace towards a new paradigm. I will send Joseph the invitation. Some of the sessions, many of the sessions will be online. You're all very invited. We're going to have Palestinians, Israelis, and international to discuss basically confederation and federation ideas. You know, we are in an apartheid situation. We are in an unprecedented social movement protesting in Israel for democracy, but not including the Palestinians. There is a time now of interregnum, what Gramsci said, that you know what is lost, but you don't know what is coming. This is the time for everybody to really contribute. And we think confederation, or perhaps even federation ideas, where the two peoples have self-determination, but some overarching institutions and management. There's no other future of peace. But as you said, the Israel is so strong, is controlling with military power. The Palestinians are so fragmented and weak, but we know this is not sustainable. So if you join us in Van Leer Institute, it will be wonderful for some of the discussions. I don't know what will be said. There are many organizations are coming. Some are coming from overseas, some coming from Palestine, some from Israel. And this will be something that if we then take the next step, some confederation organization do a conference like that, even for one day, it will be, I think, a good progress on the base of this event this next week. So I also have dinner waiting for me,
Yeah.
like
I
Avishai has.
have grandchildren
So
waiting.
thank you. Yeah,
All right.
Okay.
thank you very much, and I am happy to contribute in the future.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Tony, you wanted to say something?
I can get my mute off. Yeah, I was just, before he left, I was hoping he could put a link to what he was talking about in the WhatsApp group for this group. Yeah, but the other thing I've been thinking through this whole thing is something Bernard was saying, which he was looking at the Confederacy idea and saying, can it be done on a scalable basis? Is there a way to pick a particular issue where it's more likely to get some traction for a win-win approach? Use the Confederacy model on a smaller scale as a starting point. Does that make any sense?
Well, it shall be discussed.
I just I would like to make a suggestion. Please.
Okay, go ahead.
Do not use words like occupied. Do not use words like apartheid. Under the definition of anti-Semitism, that is anti-Semitism. So don't use words like that. I mean, go into a hospital in Israel and see all the Arabs and doctors and nurses and patients and Jewish and everybody else. So don't use words like that. Those
Len,
like terrorism.
There's a lot of Jews who are using those words, Len.
Well, they are wrong. They are wrong.
Yeah,
they are Jewish.
Don't use apartheid. Use ethnic cleansing and murder and genocide. You use those words. That may be more appropriate.
Okay, Shlomo, wait. Jay,
But when you're lying, Shlomo. I mean, we know what Africa was like. It isn't like in Israel. Go to a hospital.
Dialogue, not debate.
And you can use a hospital. Yeah.
Okay.